Okay, we'll bring this meeting to order. February 1st, 2021, of the Planning and Zoning Commission for the City of Summersville, West Virginia. First item on the board, we'd like to have consideration of meetings held on the meeting for November 16th, 2020. Do I hear a motion to accept?
Move to approve and waive the reading.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consideration of the meetings of the minutes for the meeting held January 18th, 2021. I hear a motion to approve.
Move to approve and waive the reading.
Discussion? Second, all in favor? Public comment? You have a minute?
There is none.
No one public comment? Okay, now we'll move on. Gary, I'll let you handle from here.
Okay. We've got a great evening here in front of us. Looking to have a lot of things that are accomplished this evening. I do want to set in some ground rules, sort of like a Sandlot game here. BJ Smith is going to be in charge of the mic on that side of the room. He'll be rolling it left and right as Mr. Wedge and Mr. Chapman needs it. I'll control over here and we'll hand down to Mr. Waters, Mr. Epling as they need it. It's real important that we go ahead and use these mics. It's going to be a Zoom this evening, and we want to make sure that everybody out there can hear everything that's being said. We're all pretty soft-spoken, and without these, I'm afraid that they will not be able to hear. So moving right on into the agenda, I know these folks are ready to roll. It's snowing outside, but warm in here, so we should be pretty comfortable this evening. I do not want to steal any of their thunder, but I am going to just, on behalf of the City of Summersville and this Summersville Planning and Zoning, I want to welcome everybody here this evening via Zoom. We're so happy and proud that you guys have joined in. It's such an important time for us here in the City of Summersville to have a comprehensive plan that's very workable and something that we can move forward and accomplish later on. And it takes a lot of input, and we're going to continue to build on this. This is a nice starting point, but every 2 weeks we hope to grow this, and we hope to see more folks jump on board here and help us out. We're certainly blessed. I know this commission is super blessed with the help that we have got from the West Virginia Extension, and those folks is Amy Cook, Mike Daugherty, Daniel Eads, Lauren Prenzo, Lauren Weatherford. They've just been a super help, and it's a little scary what they've pulled together so quick. They are spot on, and their information is just stellar. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over. I believe maybe Amy? Who's going to take it first, Amy or Lauren? Lauren, okay.
I'm going to take it first, and then I'm going to hand it to Amy. So,
okay.
Yeah, close enough.
So, one last thing I just want to say, we may ask at times for people to mute. I don't think we have some big issues right now, but if there's some folks out there who has dogs barking and things of that nature, we may ask you to mute. Please just hit that mute until you're ready to speak, and that'll help us out a lot. So, Lauren, it is all yours. Thank you.
All right. I am going to share my screen real quick. Can you all see that pretty well?
Yes.
Okay. So my name is Lauren Weatherford, and I am the Family and Community Development Agent for the West Virginia University Extension Service. So I am your extension agent, and I have been working with WVU and the City of Summersville on this Moving Ahead Together program, both as your county agent and as a student in a graduate course, which has for the past 18 months. One of the outcomes of those efforts was the draft comprehensive plan. So as students and also as your agent, we have done a lot of research, and we brought together, we had some listening sessions and some surveys, some interviews. Some of you may have participated in some of those. And from that research and that contact with the public, we drafted this comprehensive plan. And so the next step is to kind of, the plan was presented to the Planning and Zoning Committee through the mayor and through Gary and through your recorder. And so we've talked with them, and there's, it's a large document. And quite honestly, it's a large document. Even as someone who worked on it, it was something that I hadn't easily digested the entire thing. So to take it from its draft form through that process of adoption, we kind of have to make sure that the city is able to kind of, and the Planning and Zoning Committee in particular, is able to kind of understand what is in it, what it says, what that means, how you can work with it. There was a previous comprehensive plan that was done kind of as part of a requirement that needed to happen, and the city was able to, like many cities throughout the state, was able to hire a consulting firm. Consulting firm pretty much took a lot of feedback they got and some research, and they formed a comp plan that was then kind of accepted and then thrown on the shelf. But the idea behind this comp plan is that it isn't something that gets stuck on a shelf, but that it is a document that helps drive the intent of the city into where they want to go in the future. So the purpose of these sessions is to help you all, and hopefully we'll have some city council members, and some of you are serving on both entities right now, but we'll have some city council members who will also join, because as part of the adoption process of this comprehensive plan, the Planning and Zoning Committee is responsible for creating the draft, the official draft. So this is the first effort that we've gone through. You all, in going through these educational sessions, will then take what the information you have and ask questions, and then you'll be able to format this existing draft into your draft, which will then be presented to City Council. There'll be some public hearings for public comment, and in time, it'll go back once or twice, and then you all will present it to City Council, who will then adopt it. And hopefully at that point, this will become a functional plan that will really help drive some of the direction and the activities of the city of Summersville. One of the things I mentioned last week when I talked to City Council was that this is the kind of plan. So when people say, oh, you all just sit in those committees and you just make decisions and they don't have anything to do with the public, this is an opportunity for that to be different. For you all to say, no, we're not making decisions just because we felt like it on Monday night. We're making decisions because that's what's in the plan. And that's what's in these public comments. That's where we've gotten feedback. And we've really taken the time to go through it. So this team, and Amy's going to introduce the entire team here in just a moment. The team that we were able to put together were Amy Cook, who is a family and community development agent. She works in neighboring counties, but she is a native of Summersville, lifelong. So many of you may know her and be familiar. I know that we've already talked of a neighbor. So Amy has also been instrumental. She was in the same place I was as a student and a faculty member with the Extension Service. And then we have 3 specialists from Morgantown who are going to help us. And we're going to go through each week. We're going to gather, we're going to go through 1 or 2 elements that are in the plan. There's 10 total. And then really kind of examine those elements. What do they say? What do they need to say? What questions do we have about what is in there? And then hopefully towards the end, you all will be able to then modify that plan and make it one that you all want to present to City Council. Does anyone have any questions so far? There'll be a lot more information coming. All right, Amy, I'm turning it over to you.
All right, I'm just going to take a couple minutes to introduce you to our team. And Lauren, if you'll stop sharing there, I'm going to share something. There we go. All right. Well, thanks to alphabetical order, I get to introduce myself first. I'm Amy Cook, and I know a lot of you. Lifelong resident, if you don't include when I went to college, or those few years I lived in Dill because that's where my husband is from. But we do live in Summersville again. And like Lauren mentioned, I am a family and community development agent like she is, but I work in Braxton and Clay counties. And I have mainly focused on strengthening families, health promotion, and community development in my tenure with WVU. I've been working in those counties for about 12 years. I have a bachelor's degree in health sciences, and my master's degree is in rehabilitation counseling. Next up, we have Mike Doherty. And interestingly, before I read his bio, I'll let you know that Mike has already done some work in Nicholas County. He worked with our Nicholas County Veterans Memorial Park a few years back to help them develop some things. So he's familiar, which is a great thing. He is a professor and an extension specialist for WVU Extension Service. He's focusing his efforts on planning and community development. He has a PhD in planning from Virginia Tech, and he serves on the Board of Trustees of the Community Development Council and serves on several committees for the National Association of Community Development Extension Professionals. He has worked with local governments and community organizations across the Mountain State and teaches several planning courses at WVU. Next up, we have Daniel Eads. Daniel is an associate professor and rural development specialist for WVU Extension Service. His teaching and outreach activities engage government and community leaders in the process of data-driven economic development decision-making and support a breadth of community and economic development initiatives from housing and workforce development to rural tourism and local foods. His research interests include rural and regional development economics, the community development process and community vitality, and community data analysis. And next we have Lauren Prinzo. Lauren is an assistant professor and a specialist in community economic development for WVU Extension. As a specialist, she works to create, implement, and evaluate initiatives that build the capacity of people and organizations in the areas of community engagement and innovation and entrepreneurship. She has more than 10 years of experience developing, coordinating, and evaluating community-based initiatives. Her areas of interest include youth engagement, public engagement, community health, and workforce development. And lastly, we have Lauren Weatherford, who you've already heard from, and many of you probably know her as well from working in the community. She's an associate professor, family and community development agent in Nicholas County and Fayette as well. She holds a bachelor's degree in social and decision sciences from Carnegie Mellon University and a master's degree in public administration from WVU. Her work experience includes a focus on international and local community development. That international stuff is really interesting if you ever get a chance to talk to her about it. Wellness education, and more than 20 years of experience in teaching. So that's our team, and like Lauren mentioned before, we have 2 agents and 3 specialists. Our agents typically work out in the counties, and our specialists are often housed in Knapp Hall, but they work across all the counties in West Virginia on different projects. So we're very excited to work with you all. I think this is going to be great for the city of Summersville, and I will turn it over to Mike Doherty.
First of all, I'm glad to be here virtually right now. At some point, hopefully, actually. But if you look at the agenda, this part talks about the adoption and, more importantly, the formation process of the plan. The document that you have before you, and we'll be talking about over the next few months, should be considered a draft. It was done by students, and it's a good starting point for where you want to look at the future of Summersville. But the opportunity now is to make it your own, because that's really what a plan has to be. Your last plan was done by a consulting firm, which is now a different consulting firm, and it is, the nice thing is you have time because you don't have to, they're good for 10 years, and it was done in 2013. But most importantly, you want to take the time so you get it right. I know there have been concerns, and we'll talk about these as we go through about what is in this plan. But I also know that a lot of work and research went into this plan, which will be beneficial to help the Planning and Zoning Committee make decisions and serve as a beginning point to get public input so that we are able to help you figure out where your plan wants to go, or where you want to go with your plan. Once you have that finalized, and the most important sections in state code are Chapter 8A, Article 3, Sections 6, 7, and 8. Section 6 talks about public input. we're doing these, we're opening them up to the public, we've done other public information gathering, and as the development of this has gone through, and this is in addition to the required public hearing. The idea behind this is so that the plan reflects the community. It doesn't just reflect someone sitting in an office somewhere with a consulting firm, or someone sitting in an office in Morgantown on campus and sitting as a faculty member and making decisions. Decisions need to be yours, and by yours I mean the communities, the Planning and Zoning Committee, the council, the citizens of Summersville. Put that together, and then once you are happy with what the plan contains, once you gathered from the public, made changes, and approved it, you send it to public hearing, which requires a public notice of 15 days, and that's described in 8837. Once you have that public hearing, then you either amend or adopt or bring back and change tremendously. You may get things in public hearing, you want to make changes, that's okay. I've seen everything happen from new ideas to no ideas in those public hearings. And you do those because you want to make sure the public has one last chance, because you do all the public input to comment, and that they don't feel like they are not part of the process. Once you approved it, it goes to, in this case, Summersville City Council, which then has up to 90 days to act upon it, and they must also hold a public hearing to get input to make sure that no one has any real issues with what is being said. If they approve it, it gets filed with the county clerk. If they don't approve it, it goes back to, they have to tell the Planning Commission, which in Summersville case, the Planning and Zoning Committee, why they did not approve it. If you're doing your work right, you don't have to worry about that because you involve members of council and they don't include anything that's going to surprise council in the plan. But that's in there because that does happen, that there sometimes isn't communication. Unfortunately, I've seen that happen a time or two. It is not a fun situation, but generally, that's never anything to worry about. But that is what, in essence, it has. It's a, put the plan together, planning and zoning committee signs off on it after a public hearing, council approves it after a public hearing. And that becomes, as Lauren talked about, that becomes the foundation on which the city should make decisions about where to develop, what type of development to undertake, and what other activities are appropriate to move Summersville forward for the next decade. Comprehensive plans are good for a decade. You should review them every year or two and do major revision or revisiting about 7 or 8 years in, so you have time to meet and complete by that 10-year window. So that's really what the plan process is. I think it was pretty well summarized by your attorney, Amy Gross, in her memo to Greg Tucker last June. But I just wanted to reiterate what we're looking toward. But the most important step is the one you're undertaking now, which is getting the plan right and making sure it reflects what you as members of the community and the community at large want. And we've heard some feedback that some parts do and some parts don't. So we are here tonight to go through this and have dialogue and help you understand things that you may not realize, why they're in there, and also determine things that are in there that shouldn't be, or things that should be in there that are not. And at this point, to begin that review, I believe I turn it over to Daniel Eves.
Thanks, Mike. Amy or Lauren, can I share my screen? Do I have permissions?
You should now.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so with everybody else, I'll say thank you, and it's good to be with you all. Jason, you're one of the only other Eads that I've encountered, so I wish we were there in person so I could learn more about where you're from and that. I grew up down in Beckley. My parents are both from the Midwest though, so a little bit of a transplant. All right, so I do want to say that yeah, the plan that we're going to go through, hopefully you all had a chance to at least start to look at elements of it. And hopefully you feel that you had some sort of involvement in its creation. Lauren mentioned those, the community feedback and listening sessions, and Mike brought them up as well. I know that as this was being developed, finalized, how about that, last semester, given the current situation with the pandemic, getting some of that input may have been a little bit challenging, which may be contributing to some of the misunderstanding or feeling like that input hasn't been there thus far. So again, we're gonna walk through and get feedback on the different elements, let you ask questions. We're gonna do our best to answer what we can, and what we can't, we will kind of put in a parking lot and be able to circle back to with students who were involved in the planning work, other faculty from WVU or other institutions in the state, and other technical assistance providers that we work with on a regular basis. So everything that's in there, again, should be based on things that were either heard by our other faculty members and the student planners as they went through the process, or that are part of best practices in community development. Nothing should be too far left field, but again, we do want to make sure that it's something that is appropriate for the community and something that you all who are going to be leading a lot of these efforts feel comfortable with. The other thing that I want to point out, when I get to the slides, it may not represent it, but another thing that I think can be kind of confusing about the way the plan's presented is that it's very actionable. So normally when we would talk about things, we would think about what are my goals and then the objectives and the strategies. And this one, if you look at it, a lot of it is written backwards. It starts with those strategies and moves towards the goals. So sometimes that can be just a little bit different way of thinking about it. But again, this document was designed to not just be a plan that would go on a shelf, but would be something that is actionable and that the community will get behind and start to break into pieces and begin working on those different elements in order to achieve the goals that are identified by the plan. Okay. Are you all seeing my PowerPoint here? Awesome, thanks, Lauren. So again, I do want to point out that while we are engaging with you all in this process, this material is not ours. It's yours, and will become, hopefully you'll feel more ownership of it as we go through this process. But it's also material that was created through an initiative led by Dr. Margaret Stout with public administration up there at WVU, and several student planners who are involved in the process as well. So I do want to make sure that they get credit for all their hard work. All right, I'm gonna break some PowerPoint rules here. Normally I would have pictures and things like that, but we are focused explicitly on this content. So I just want to kind of go through. It's going to be maybe a little bit challenging since we're doing it by Zoom. I can't really read the room. But I really want you to weigh in anytime you have a question, anytime something doesn't make sense. If it's something you don't like, if it's something you do like, let us know so that we can kind of have this dialogue. We're going to walk through the individual elements. And next time we meet, if we decide this isn't working right, we can tweak things as we go. But for right now, this is how we're going to go through it. So that resources section is there because these are really what forms it's everything that the community kind of has to work with, right? We've got the human elements, but all the economic elements kind of flow from this natural resource piece. So we're thinking about how does the community affect the natural environment, and how can those natural assets be leveraged by the community in order to grow the economy, to improve quality of life for residents and visitors, things like that. So within this natural resource piece, there are two broad goals. The first one is to promote the protection of natural resources, to ensure future enjoyment, And then the second one is to ensure environmentally safe development. And I'll go through each one of these, and again, if there are questions, please jump in. All right, under that first goal, we've got two objectives. The first one is to establish land use policies that conserve the resources. And then objective 2 is to preserve specific land uses, including forest and agricultural land. So as we look at how the community can establish and implement land use policies to conserve water, maintain water and air quality, we're looking at collaborations with existing public entities that are doing this work. So the Elk Conservation District specifically, establishing riparian buffers along all surface water bodies. So riparian ways are just those land-water interfaces, those edge environments. So there's a couple of numbers here. We got 100 feet from perennial streams and 50 feet from intermittent streams. Mike can weigh in on this. I think that 50 foot is kind of the usual best practice that's
The gold standard is 100 feet from the perennial streams. However, you start looking at research and it can get, spaces as small as, the gold standard is actually, it's expressed in meters, it's 30 meters, which is about 100 feet. But research shows that buffers as small as 5 or 6 meters, we're talking 17 to 20 feet, can be very effective. It's going to depend on the vegetation. Seasonality has a big impact, so they're not quite as effective in winter because of cold temperatures, but I think that often goes for all buffers. And exactly what you're having the buffer put in place for, what you're trying to prevent. So the idea behind this, the numbers are very standard numbers, but the concept is protecting the areas along the streams so you don't have development right up to the water bodies, which are going to, just by their very nature, cause undesirable chemicals and materials and sediments to accidentally wash into the streams.
Great, thanks. Okay, strategy 1.1.1.3, identify and protect sensitive wetlands, require groundwater testing for development proposals in areas not yet served by sewer facilities, and then incorporate natural stormwater runoff management systems. And there's several listed there. Now again, all of these have this water focus. Hopefully that makes sense, right? If you look at the background that Amy has with Long Point there, and you look at the lake, and think about the rivers that are in the area and how those are part of the community's identity and a contributor to things like the recreation economy. That's why these are so important. There's obviously health benefits as well that are important, but I think that's something that you want to keep in mind, right? How all of these are going to fit together into this larger plan that we have. So just looking at these, are there any concerns that folks have with these, or any questions?
I have a question on 1.4.
Okay.
Require groundwater testing for development. Who determines what kind of test that is? Who monitors that test? And what do you do with the results?
So that's a great question. It's my understanding, Mike may know this, and we may need to do some follow-up with some outside technical experts. I don't think that West Virginia has any requirements that you need to do testing around wells and groundwater around these developments. But this would be a good best practice to identify things like chloroform and make sure that you're not having bacteria and things coming from the sewer getting into the groundwater and then contaminating water that people are going to be drinking and could be entering larger bodies of water. So as far as enforcement and things like that, That's one that we have to explore some of the more legal ways to get teeth into it. Mike, do you have anything that you
Well,
can?
two thoughts. First of all, if the area doesn't have public sewer, my understanding is the health department has to certify for a perk test before you can do any construction on it. So that's something already
That's
existing.
state law, so that's, I mean, that's just state law, so that's repetition here we don't need.
Yeah, the second part, I'm not sure, just given, I mean, are there, you know, the one thing that jumped out at me as I reviewed this is, are there areas within the boundaries of Somersville that don't have public water and sewer?
I can't answer that, but we have members of council here that might be able to, or a recorder here might know.
I can't think of any of
I would doubt it.
Yeah, I mean, that was the one thing reading to me is that given the boundaries and that this comprehensive plan, you only have jurisdiction over the city of Somersville. West Virginia.
We do have 100% water throughout the entire city, but we are not 100% sewer.
Okay, so certainly, you know, every place is served by the water, the public water, and sewer is going to have, as I said, some sort of state test requirement for a perk test before you get a permit. So this may not be as necessary an element or a strategy because it just really doesn't apply. And so that's something that, as part of this, we're going through, it's like, so this is something we'll flag to see if it really even needs to be included, because you're serving every place with, as you said, with water. And we know there's some state testing on sewer, so we'll put this in the parking lot to check to see exactly what has to be about its applicability and what we need to do from here. But that was something, again, I wondered about myself, and I'm glad this came up.
Well, my initial concern is for a developer or a development, or I want to build my own house. How am I going to find out the person that I deal with when I get the results, and what am I looking for? I mean, this could be very voluminous for a developer or me as a prospective home builder, and that's just adding additional cost and adding additional bureaucracy that I don't know if we need or not. Especially since it's not state law.
Right, I mean, if you have to hook, you know, there may be requirements depending on your place, what you have to hook up for, you know.
So we don't know if there is or there isn't?
I'm sorry, sir, I didn't quite catch that.
So we don't know if there is or there is not a requirement on the books anywhere?
That I would defer to the city officials, but as I said, they said it's 100, every place is served by public water. I can't see, it's highly unlikely that someone given the option of public water would choose to not go with public water, but that's something, again, that's often a health department, whether or not you can get your water certified as potable and whether or not you can get your land to perk, and what other regulations may be in place. I know in the county where I was growing up, once they put the sewers in, you were required to hook up to the sewers, and you could, if you had septic, you know, we all had septic, and we could stay on septic until they failed. But I'm not sure what the situation is, so that's something, again, I think we need to revisit. I think we need to revisit, and that's the reason it's now red.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions or concerns about these? Okay, hearing none. All right, objective 1.12 is to preserve nearby forests and agricultural lands. Again, a collaboration strategy to work with other regional authorities to preserve these areas and then collaborate with the county to ensure that the development and land use development and natural resource extraction don't result in the loss of forest and agriculture lands important to the city. Questions or concerns about either of these? Okay. All right, goal 1.2, ensure environmentally safe development, which includes 3 objectives: restrict or regulate development in flood-prone areas, restrict or regulate development of areas with high-risk slope and soil conditions, and then brownfield remediation. So under that first objective, these are going to be one where we'll see this for some of the other ones too. Identifying and assessing which land parcels are included, in this case, in the FEMA 100-year flood hazard area, and then establishing a zoning overlay district that will prevent harm to those water resources and also people and businesses within the identified flood hazard area. So the proposal was to do an open space zoning overlay district for these areas. Questions or concerns about this? Okay. Objective 1.2.3, restrict or regulate development of areas with high-risk slopes. Again, we have part 1, which is an assessment and identification of those areas that would have slopes or soil types that would pose a hazard were they to be developed, and identifying those on future land use maps, and then establishing a hillside zoning overlay district with development standards that would ensure that only the correct types of uses are happening. So preventing potential harm to people, water resources, businesses, etc. Questions about this?
Daniel, just curious, we have some conservation areas in some of our areas. Is this referring to this? Is this what we're talking about, some of those conservation areas also?
Yeah, I think the open space zoning overlays would include those.
Okay.
We need to check on that, but it does seem to be that they would probably be very similar areas and a similar purpose.
Yeah, I mean, I hear a lot about risk slopes and things of that nature when I see the conservation areas, so that's what I was curious about. We have some of those in our city.
Yeah, so I mean, I would say the recommendation here would just be to maintain the zoning that allows for those to exist, and then just think about if and where they would need to be, I don't want to say need to be, but could be expanded in order to protect the other areas.
Okay.
The riparian areas, flood prone areas, or places that would be limited to by the kind of building that could happen there.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, and then brownfield remediation. So again, inventorying potential brownfields and contaminated sites. I think this would also include vacant and dilapidated buildings as well, and then prioritizing those properties for remediation activities. The Northern West Virginia Brownfield Center up at WVU has a really good reputation. They also have the Bad Buildings Program, which is a community-based program to do the inventory. And then you can work with the center to identify grant opportunities for remediation, and a community plan to engage owners and those sorts of things. That's a really good way to go about this. There's also a Southern Center based out of Marshall, I believe. I'm not as familiar with their programs, but I'm sure they're doing similar things. I know Patrick Kirby, who was the director at our Northern Center until just I think a few weeks ago, actually. He worked closely with them. Carrie, who took his place, she could help fill us in there if there are any questions or concerns about this, or if there are specific follow-up steps the community would like to take going forward. So, any questions about this?
Yes, we have Mr. Wedge.
Sorry to keep asking questions, but
No, please.
to me, this is probably one of the most dangerous areas for a city that we can discuss, because once one of these is identified, and your statement there says all potentially contaminated sites, we could be talking about old gas stations and whatever, which could really impact a pretty large area. Have you experienced any of this activity in other cities through some of your comprehensive plans?
I haven't directly seen it as part of the planning process, but I've worked with the Brownfields Center. There actually are ways, that's one of the things that's changed over the years, that there are now programs that if you start and where it's much easier to remediate, to get absolved of responsibility, so to speak, if you're actually sitting there and being proactive. So the idea would be to work with the Brownfield Centers to find out how to do this in a way that would hold the city in least precarious position. If any, and I'm not saying it'd be a precarious position, but there's ways now and programs now to help communities revitalize places and remediate sites that don't make it so punitive. It used to be pretty much you got punished for trying to do the right thing. And those making decisions have recognized that, and programs are now in place to help you go through and help communities go through and make those improvements and prepare those places to once again be vital cogs within the community, rather than just letting them sit there and no one, fencing them off and no one touching them because they're scared of liability. And that's the big thing. For gas stations, it usually means it's the fix is often as simple as just getting the tanks out of there and making sure the soil's okay if there's any contaminated soil. It's not as, the processes have become much more straightforward. They're not, unless it's something really pernicious, it's not as overarching as it once was or as some expect it to be. But again, I would and I think the reason for this and our recommendation would be, if you have anything of that nature, as you work with the Brownfield Assistance Center, and I believe you're still in the North, and I'm trying to confirm that, to get their help, because they are experts at this. They know everything, they know the programs, they know the law. They would be able to help a community figure this out. And even if it's not in your plan, it's a good idea to bring them down, because it could open up places that you've forgotten about or saw problems you didn't even know you had and wouldn't find until let's redevelop it, or let's do something on this place, and they do the soil test and find out, it's a brownfield, or there's contamination here. So that's the long and short, is that there are increasingly better ways to handle these than what it used to be, which was very much, it's your land, you're stuck with it, you've got to fix it. You make on, to get yourself relief in those situations.
Yeah, and I mean, as far as like a success story, if that helps, this process was undertaken in Moundsville, years ago, 2013 or so, and that was the Fostoria glass plant that was up there, was one of those that was very easy to inventory and identify. but we got the community connected with Patrick Shop, the Northern Brownfield Center there, and they were able to get some EPA grants to get the property taken down and do the necessary capping that was there. And I'm not sure if anything has gone into that site yet or not, but it was able to remove the factory that was falling apart and clean up the site so it can be developed in the future. So I guess I would say this is one that, if these are privately owned places, if there's something like a leaking underground storage tank, that's gonna fall to DEP or somebody like that to enforce. But what this does give you, again, is an opportunity to start the process of thinking about how to identify resources and begin the remediation process, if that's what you want to do.
Okay, thank you.
The program is, it's a Voluntary Remediation and Redevelopment Act of 1996. Limits enforcement, we go through that, limits enforcement, provides financial assistance, limits liability under environmental laws, and essentially you just need to have a plan for public involvement in cleanup. It's a much, pardon the pun, cleaner way of handling these than what it used to be in the past. And a lot of people just don't know about it because they see brownfield and run, but it's been out there for close to 25 years now.
And I think if we look at things and just remember to look at things in terms of the scope of city limits, it's not as big as the whole county. But because the plan only applies to what's within city limits, if we do things like this, and it seems like a huge undertaking, but we would only be responsible for what's inside city limits, but also be setting a very good example for the entire county. And once you start bringing in those resources to help the city, that kind of thing can branch out and that the county can benefit as well.
Yeah, it's a great point.
Oh, just something I'd throw in real quick because of subject matter. We do have in our city inventory one location. It's on Main and Broad, right on the corner. We have worked several times trying to remediate the site. It is compliant and grandfathered, but of course there can't be any change of structure or change to the property because the tanks still exist. And so we have tried a couple of times over the past decade to work with getting that site remediated, clean, tanks removed, but it is owned by an individual that it was like a co-op, a partnership deal, even with some funding that we found. And at the time, the owner had no interest in being involved in the program.
And that can always come up and be an issue. But if at some point, if they wish to dispose of the property, sell it, give it away, or what have you, then sometime the cleanup will have to, someone else will end up probably wanting to do the cleanup.
Yeah, so all of those in the room probably are aware what property I'm talking about. It does have an older building that, as time continues will become an issue, and it is what it is because the site building and the site itself cannot be changed until the tanks are dealt with. But just for the record, they are totally compliant with DEP as it sits today.
And I do want to correct one thing I said. Your actual Nicholas County, Somerville, is actually in the southern region. It's this northernmost county in the southern, covered by the Southern West Virginia Brownfield Assistance Center, which is at Marshall in their Center for Environmental, Geotechnical, and Applied Sciences. And from everything I understand, they're just the Marshall version of what we have up in Morgantown for this. So that they would be doing the exact same thing and have the exact same programmatic access and success.
Yeah, this is not something we need to necessarily solve tonight, but if this is an area of interest or concern, either way, we can have Carrie or somebody from the Northern Center talk about what they do and what they offer, and then whether they're the partner or the Southern Center is the partner, and go from there. But we can get you more details on what those programs are, exactly how they work, and how they might be beneficial, and we can decide if this is something you want to include at the end.
And Daniel and Mike, because I know that you can only see a limited number of people on your screen, I just wanted to let you know that's our Mayor Schaefer, that was providing those comments earlier, in case you can't see him.
Yeah, great, thank you. Thank you for that.
And that's why we're here, is to try to help you through this process and figure things out. And because we know that anytime any community does a plan, there are going to be things in the original draft that don't mesh with things, or things that you have questions on. And that's what we're doing now.
Okay, I'm going to move on. If there's no other discussion with this one, I'll move on to I believe we're going to go to the next section with this cultural resources. Elizabeth Satterfield is on here as well. She's listed as one of the student planners for this section, but she does professional work as well in public history and cultural resource management. So, knowing that this is not my expertise, thought it'd be good if I could get her on here. So she's here with us, so she can weigh in as well if there are questions about any of these specific priorities here. So goal 2.1, ensure stewardship of historic, architectural, archaeological, and cultural resources. And then the large goal 2.2, foster growth and development of the arts and culture. And you can see the objectives here. Rather than read these, I'll just jump into them, and you can see the objectives and strategies as we go through. So objective 2.1, increase preservation of historic sites, buildings, and areas. This includes establishing a historic landmark commission through the city, as approved through the Department of Arts, Culture, and History at the state level. Apply for certified local government status through the West Virginia State Historic Preservation Office. And then once that is established, be able to apply for grants to complete planning and inventory, surveying, etc. of historic properties and districts. Objective 2.12, designate a historic district within downtown Summersville. So the first part there would be to define the boundaries. The proposed boundaries in the report thus far are the area bound by Church Street, Whortleberry, hopefully I'm pronouncing that, Avenue, Spruce, and then Water Street. Once that's been established, create a historic overlay zoning district based on one or two things, either local criteria or the National Register of Historic Places, if you get the district listed on that register. And then implement historic overlay zoning districts to protect the resources that are included within that district. Any questions about any of these so far? 2.13, you charge and empower the Historic Landmark Commission with education of residents about the resources. So again, we're big on partnerships. So establish partnerships with Nicholas County's Historical Society, the county's Historic Landmark Commission, and Old Main Foundation, and other organizations that are involved in this type of teaching and outreach work. Developing a page on the city's website for information about the properties and sites and how residents and visitors can engage with them, and then create the educational programs for delivery. In this case, well, you got a couple, we'll talk about a couple options, but one of the ways that was proposed was via the city's cable television station. So it could be a good way to partner with groups like West Virginia Public Broadcasting or something and incorporate programming for the television station. 2.14, charge the Historic Landmark Commission with encouraging heritage tourism. So again, thinking about how the outdoor assets and historic assets can be brought together into a comprehensive economic development strategy. Right? This heritage tourism would be one way to play into that. So create printed materials about the local history and the historic sites, develop a walking tour. We've got good examples here in Morgantown of what that can look like. Again, partnering with active organizations like the Convention and Visitors Bureau, creating the walking tour and installing plaques or some other way that people can engage with the resources that are there in the community. And then 2.1.5, long one here, encourage thoughtful and complementary infill development or adaptive reuse of historic properties. So this kind of ties back in with our brownfield type piece, thinking about how can we, rather than doing new development, engage resources that are already there. So if we've got an educational component about the economic benefits of historic preservation and adaptive reuse, updating any zoning ordinances to encourage that adaptive reuse and infill, establishing design guidelines for building exteriors, funding for facade improvements, funding to improve ADA accessibility. That's a big one and often an expensive one. And conducting design reviews during the review process for or near identified historic sites or within the identified historic districts. And the last one, and this one is to restore and preserve historic cemeteries within the city limits. So establishing a cemetery conservation commission, assessing the condition of cemeteries that are there, organizing volunteer cleanups and work days, and then creating educational materials that can describe those properties and their value to the community. So that was kind of a long one. Are there any questions about that one? And I'm going to back it up to this one. If there are any questions or concerns, because a lot of these things were kind of similar strategies within them.
Daniel, I would be remiss and I'd probably be chased out of town if I didn't start commenting on some of these. I was privileged enough to sit in on a lot of the activities and a lot of the input that was given from town. I have to tell you, there's a lot of passionate people out there right now about the downtown area. Obviously, we have a great deal of business out on Route 19, but there's a real passion to make the downtown area more of a destination and to tell the story of Summersville. And I was lucky enough to sit in, actually Elizabeth, I've had some good conversation with her, and she brought a lot of things to light with me. I have to tell you, and I don't know, I still am concerned about some of the restrictions and some of the things that go along with making historical districts and things of that nature. I think Elizabeth calmed me a little bit in some of the things that she said, but I don't want to get ourselves into a situation where I'm telling folks on Whortleberry that they have to paint their facility a different color or they have to have certain landscaping and things of that nature. I certainly would love to see, I'm also a transplant into this area, but understand and truly I am behind making our downtown area more of a destination and telling our story. I think it brings business downtown. We have some good businesses downtown that could use some help. We have some challenges down there that I think this commission is going to have to work with. Do we have enough parking and so on and so forth? And I believe we're going to have to possibly get a little more lenient in some areas when we begin looking at some of this. But, I'm all about getting involved in the downtown historical district. I think Elizabeth, on her project, did a really good job with where she was bordering things. Certainly the ones that may say, well, I want to be in that, I think will be involved in that. Even if they're just on the outside of that, they'll see the benefit of that historical district. And we're going to have to, look at some of those things. But looking at murals on sides of buildings and what it can do and how it tells a story, I'm just blown away by those murals. Are no longer painted, they're foiled. They get pictures that are foiled, and they literally paste those to the sides of walls that last 2, 3, 4 years, and then you switch them out. But it certainly tells a story. I think, and I'm hoping that the commission will get behind this, and we'll take a hard look at these historical districts, and we certainly have passionate folks this is one that they're so willing to jump on board and get involved from the community. So this is sort of near and dear to my heart. I hope we can do some things. I'm really pleasantly surprised of the monies that is out there available for some of these projects via grants and so on and so forth. I'm not sure who's going to write those grants, but they're out there and available. And I think we're just a little behind. I mean, I think having a restaurant downtown or two is good, but we need several more. We need to have several of those places downtown. So hopefully we're going to be able to get this word out, and we can get some of the folks involved, even the ones with businesses downtown, get them involved in some of this too. But I'm hoping this commission really takes a good look at that and keeps this and makes this a part of this comprehensive plan.
Yeah, I mean, I do want to say, hopefully, Gary and Mayor Schaefer, you guys can weigh in. Does everybody have access to the implementation plans in addition to the comp plan? Because the students did some research on various implementation plans for specific properties and things like that. And Elizabeth and I think Hannah McCoy.
Yeah. Daniel, I'm sorry, we did not make those available, but I'll get with Jason. We have those, and we can post those on our website along with the other things that we've just recently posted. So yeah, I think it's important to put those up there too, because I
don't want to overwhelm people because they are very thorough. But again, I think they bring a lot of these things to life. I mean, you were talking about the murals,
yes,
and those sorts of things, and how do we fund this? The one for the downtown is I don't know how many pages, 60 pages or something.
yes,
That has not only these are ways that we can improve it, but these are the resources that you can access. These are grant programs that are there. They're really, really good, and I think that it'll help people see why these things were suggested. And again, I'm not saying that they all need to be in there, but I think if you do take a look through those, you'll appreciate why these recommendations were made.
Gary, did you make them available to the planning and zoning?
that is a great question. I can't remember if those were. Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
so-
they did.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
they got that.
So basically, our plan is, we were, and again, dealing with the challenges of the pandemic, we're trying to get our citizens involved in the comprehensive plan and its passage. And then parallel to that, we want to run another group of folks that would get engaged in all of those 5 recommendations that came out of the program with WVU. And so not to convolute things, we've been focused in trying to get folks engaged in the comprehensive plan. And behind the scenes, I've been strategizing to bring another collection of folks together because before you just throw those out, and as even Lauren and Elizabeth and Amy can speak to, there's some things in there that will not set well with some folks. And so what we need is, we need the education piece to come with those instead of just laying them out there. And so we're kind of working on that to parallel it with this, but the focus has been getting up and running with the engagement of the comprehensive plan and its passage.
Yeah, and I think that's fine. I don't know. I'm not suggesting that those plans maybe need to be available to the whole city or anything like that, but if the folks on, who would be doing the adoption of the plan, it might be good if they can see pieces of them as it makes sense. So that's fine. I completely agree with that strategy. I think focusing on this process first is good and where we need to be. I just want people to know that we can draw from some of those if there are questions about what some of these things may look like or could look like. So just for folks to be aware that they are there. So again, if there are any questions about, because I know we're getting to watch our time here too.
Yeah, we have another question.
I got a couple of questions. One, was there any thought, as opposed to doing a historic district, as opposed to doing a Main Street project? What's your thoughts on one or the other? I know your thought on the historic district. What do you think about compared to a Main Street project?
Well, somebody else can weigh in here too. I mean, I would say that they're both compatible. The nice thing about doing the historic district is that it gives you an opportunity to apply for grants that you might not otherwise be eligible for. I know some people get scared by the enforcement teeth. I think most of the time it's not as scary as people think it is. But you just have a little bit more control over how and where things can happen. Elizabeth is on here; she can weigh in with that. So I think something like a Main Street certification would be a really good way, especially if you're thinking about economic development pieces with this, to have that coupled with this. But I think there's some pieces that you can get that you can't. But by doing the Historic Landmark Commission and a official historic district, you're able to get more and do more. Elizabeth, is that correct?
Yeah. Hi, this is Elizabeth. So to answer your question, Main Street and historic districts are very compatible. Main Street as an organization came out of the National Trust for Historic Preservation originally, so it's very compatible with historic districts. We discussed when we were doing all of the work and planning here at WVU, suggesting a Main Street program. The one issue that comes up with that is it is usually for cities that have a really well-established community organization, and usually you start at a lower level as it's called on track. The last time I heard, they weren't accepting new communities. So that's why it's not mentioned in this part of the plan. However, a lot of the ideas that come with Main Street and the approaches of Main Street are sprinkled throughout this entire comprehensive plan, especially when you get to the economic development section. So I would say it would be great to have a Main Street organization. It's maybe something down the road that would happen. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it would fit with this comprehensive plan. But to answer the question about historic districts and how restrictive they are, when something's listed on the National Register, you can still do whatever you want to your property. There's absolutely no restrictions when you list something on the register. If you alter the property to a point where it no longer has integrity, it could be removed from the register.
I thought that there were guidelines for making improvements. Have those been removed?
If you use federal funds, there are restrictions. But if it's just on the register, it's just an honorary listing. So it actually doesn't have any teeth to it. The teeth come in, and you can see this when we would be looking at, I think it was objective 2.1.5 maybe. Conducting design review. If the Historic Landmarks Commission, once established, if they wanted to have design review, and that's when things can be restrictive. That doesn't have to happen, but it's nice to have it here in the comprehensive plan so that the Historic Landmarks Commission can have the option. And it doesn't have to be as restrictive as paint colors. It can say, it can be more generic than that. Most design review is not arbitrary. It's like, significant alterations, need to be reviewed, not paint color. And I hope that answers your question.
The federal government doesn't get involved unless they give you money, as far as what you can do. Then it's sort of a contract, you take the money to do the changes, and then you are in a much more position of having limitations, but you've been paid for that with the money you've taken in whatever program. Then if you were doing a fix up yourself, there would be no strings attached because it would be your funds. The big thing about a historic district would be finding enough contributing properties, structures, objects, buildings within a confined area. You already have half a dozen places on the National Register in Summersville. 3 of them are on Main Street: the courthouse, the bank, and the old high school. The other 3 are further out: the Brock Hotel on Webster, then the Martin Hamilton House, and the Dr. Flavius Brown House. So they probably wouldn't be in the part of the historic district. You probably want to combine and small. This might go to some of that downtown redevelopment was talking about. If you had to get the flavor to make it a destination, you could had enough contributing resources within that confined area to create a district. And what happens is if you have those, and then if it dips below a certain point, if you lose them, then you lose the district. But again, unless there is money taken or local rules put into place, that listing on the National Register does not invoke any regulatory rules. It does not invoke local historic zoning. That's all a local decision. If you make those decisions locally to do that, that's people of Summersville making decisions for people of Summersville, not the federal government. If no money changes hands, there's no restrictions. But again, finding that district, deciding if that's the route you want to go, most importantly, are all decisions that would rest with Summersville and its citizens.
Thank you.
Right. So goal 2.2 under our cultural resources: foster growth and development of the arts and culture. So here are the objectives, and again, rather than read them here, I'll bump through them as we get to them. So 2.2.1, increase the presence of arts and cultural activities in the community. Establish an arts and culture commission and provide operational space. Brown Oaks was the suggested location. Generate an arts and culture action plan. Seek funding from the West Virginia Department of Arts, Culture, and History for programs and projects. Seek funding for the arts through the West Virginia Hotel Motel tax designated for fairs, festivals, and performances. Create an arts and culture guide in collaboration with the CDB. Identify locally available arts and artisans. Identify arts and artisan incentive programs in conjunction with the Hive Small Business Development Center. And then promote the arts in schools and among community groups. So again, we can talk about it here or come back and talk about it in aggregate. I do think this is a really, it's a good strategy. I think we've seen a lot of good community development outcomes in places like Princeton that have done, I think the Create Your State was the program that started out of there. If you look at other communities that rely a lot on tourism, places like Davis and Thomas have done a really good job of leveraging arts and culture and some older buildings in downtown and put them together in really creative ways to grow the local economy. So it's a good strategy. Objective 2.2.2, increase a sense of place and community identity, especially in the downtown and tourist-oriented development areas. So create a community identity package for Summersville to coordinate signage, banners, public art, streetscape treatments, etc. And then rooting that cultural identity in things that are important, things like the lake, the Gauley River, these recognizable symbols and places of Summersville. Using public art to activate vacant lots and vacant spaces. So the aluminum murals that Gary mentioned. Install public art projects such as sidewalks, crosswalk, pavement art, and creative planters, trash cans, cigarette receptacles, etc. Choosing ambient music for downtown that matches the chosen community identity, and implementing a % for the arts development fee. So 1% of the development's total cost to fund public art projects. (2.2.3) create inclusive spaces for arts and cultural experiences. Again, this will tie in with economic development and then also the Parks and Rec section. But create spaces for live music and performances downtown. Incentivize spaces for art galleries and artist workspaces through public-private partnerships. Create spaces for downtown events like farmers markets, fairs, and festivals. And again, expanding use of some of these properties like Brown Oaks property.
I will just say, Daniel, that in the project implementation plan, this isn't just for you, but I guess for everyone on the call, that both this goal about arts and culture and the historic preservation and historic district are discussed in detail. So if you have a lot of questions about it, it's a long document, but we do have a lot of research in there and might help answer questions about our rationale for some of these strategies and objectives.
So any questions and concerns about any of these? Again, I imagine what's going to happen is that the things like the goals and objectives will be good, or just be some of the strategies that people may object to, which is fine.
Can I ask a question?
Daniel, we have a question.
Sure.
Councilman LaRose is here and would like to ask a question.
Absolutely.
Just out of curiosity, I've been waiting for this one to kind of come up with the Somersville Lake and the Golly River. How well have you, with your group, in previous collaborations, worked with the Army Corps of Engineers when it comes to that? How much success have you had? Seems that they do whatever they want, whenever they want, and then towns are usually the last ones to know. Am I correct in saying something like that?
Yeah, I've got very limited experience working with them. I'm trying to think if they would have had any involvement in Ravenswood just because of flooding issues. I don't believe I've had any direct experience working with them.
Couple things. So Lauren and I have throughout this process, and I will say that I know it's been very difficult in the past to get any sort of collaboration, but the people that we have talked to in the past year and a half seemed more willing to do some of that collaboration type stuff than maybe what they were in years past. So I do understand your concern though. And the other thing is, the master plan for the lake is out for public comment right now. So as you're reading through this plan, if you see things that correspond to what that draft master plan looks like that you think could affect one another, it's a great time to go and make those comments. And I know the mayor has advertised the link before where you go and do that, but if anybody needs it, we'll get that to you because this is our chance for input into what the Corps of Engineers is going to do with Somersville Lake, and I can't stress the importance of that enough. It's a great question, and glad you brought it up.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions? Hearing none.
Okay. Well, that gets us through the first two sections. So I don't have the agenda in front of me. I'll tell you what, I'll open it up real quick. Are there any other questions or comments that people want to throw out there at this point?
If I could just say real quick, I think it would be good for, and I know the Planning Commission has done a tremendous amount of work already getting us where we are, but it would be good for you all to go back and revisit those projects and then maybe prioritize them. and send that message back to me on what to focus on. As you continue to work through this plan, those projects are going to continue to be highlighted. And, the real struggle we have right now, and I'm not trying to, beat the drum here, but it's just getting people engaged. It's just a hard time to get anybody engaged. And so maybe if you all could revisit those, being it that your eyes have laid on them, and prioritize them back to me, then maybe what we could do is narrow it down and begin to work on some of that work, great work of that prior project that we were in, moving Summersville forward together. All of this is challenging. As I said here and go through this last section, cultural and historical resources and the arts, I think about Ivy and Stone. I would say that we had a second to none arts program here in our community. And one of the challenges I think that somehow the bridge we got to get across is this rural America piece. And how we can make this stuff happen with limited numbers and a smaller community. So anyway, that would be my remarks. Is maybe you all, the Planning and Zoning Commission, could give me some feedback on prioritizing those projects.
That's a quick question. What happened to Ivy and Stone? I ran across them as I was doing some research on it, and I went to but I couldn't find it. And the website gave me some place selling some things with a script of a language script I could not read.
So even as you went through some of that stuff, it really didn't come down to a funding mechanism for them, because not only did they try to engage the community, they were seriously engaged in our educational system, both at the elementary level and the high school. But what it came down to is participation. They would bring these groups in and bring the arts in, and we're talking from storytelling to entertainment, and we just could not get, they couldn't, and again, I give them all the kudos. I mean, it was, they really brought some neat cultural and art things to our community, but it was just getting the public engaged and participation. If you attended one of their events, there would be, 20, 25 people. And, we're talking about venues that were costing 10 to 15,000, in some cases more. Even the city through our hotel motel funded them annually. And then they had great corporate sponsorship and other sponsorship, even through the state's grant processes, historical and whatever that grant is that they do. So again, it came down to community engagement. So what they ended up doing is they had a pot of money, and it sits in the Community Foundation today as a scholarship fund, encouraging kids that are interested in the arts to apply for a scholarship.
How long have they been defunct?
Oh, I'm gonna guess they probably dissolved maybe 5 years ago. Jimmy, you might even know more. I know you and Donna were regular participants. Do you know how long ago it was?
I'm thinking along 3 years. I didn't think it was 5.
Okay, and you may be correct.
I think also one of the problems with it was they lost the leader of the pack. When he retired, I think there was a real void there. And I'm sorry, I can't think of his name, y'all. Who was it that was ahead of us? He emceed all the events and everything.
Rex Haynes.
Pardon me?
Rex Haynes.
Rex Haynes.
Yes. He did a tremendous job.
Yeah, but even prior to his departure, him and his wife, and I can't even think of what her name was. Sally, that's right. Sally and Rex. It just, the numbers just weren't, it just wasn't working for them. And again, I think it goes back to the challenges that we face in a rural community.
Well, I guess as you're going through them and thinking about the pieces you want to prioritize, I mean, this is a plan for Summersville, but be thinking about other partners that might be relevant, that might be outside of the city, because the more bodies and more connections you can make, kind of broaden that network. That always helps.
And also, if you're going through this again and prioritizing and you come up with questions what we went over tonight, don't think that just because we went over it tonight that we're finished with it. If the questions arise, please bring them to us or get them to Amy or Lauren so they can get them to us, and we'll try to find answers for you from our sources, because it's important that this plan is yours, and it's important that that reflects what you want, and that you understand. I keep thinking that you accept it. That's not, I can't think of anything else, but that you embodiment, that you want it to be the way Summersville is going to move forward under your watch.
Well, I've got a question for you, and then I'll be quiet. Is it too early to ask how much funding is going to be required for this whole program to be implemented? And also, what size bureaucracy will it take? And does the city government appoint all those positions to fill? I didn't mean to stump you, I just asked the question.
That's good. That's a fair question. Elizabeth, for things like the Historic Landmarks Commission, how are those usually appointed positions by somebody in the city, or?
Yeah, so they're usually appointed, but I know, like in the case of Morgantown, they have a City Landmarks Commission, and there's almost always vacancies, so it's more of like volunteers. It's people. It's not like you're trying to go out and find people. It's very reliant on people stepping up in the community. And the Historic Landmarks Commission would be, it's all volunteer based. So like the people on it usually are not paid. Some cities they pay them, but like most they don't. For the terms of bureaucracy, there can be a lot of paperwork if they start getting into grants. Yeah, that's a lot of work, and they may want to hire a grant writer. They may want to work with somebody at WVU. There could be somebody in the community that has some grant writing experience that could help. I hope I'm answering the question, because I know there was a few different questions all at once.
The plan, the comprehensive plan is designed to be foundational. It's not something that you're going to implement. Everything's going to be done today, or tomorrow, right after you approve it. It's what goals you're going to be working for over the time horizon of this plan is 20 years. It has to be reviewed and revised and reapproved every 10 years. So this is it's aspirational in a lot of cases. So some of these things are as much or as little bureaucracy as you want, or as by you I mean the community, not any individual. Like Elizabeth said, the Historic Landmark Commission, their biggest function is to find things that are historic and point them out so they can be and figure out if they can be saved. And then if you're going along that route trying to save them, then they're trying to raise money to get or help others raise money to get things done. And that's just one example. You're familiar with the former volunteer arts commission that was in the city. Again, if that became a city function, it would be very similar. But a lot of these are, again, volunteer driven, and most of the paperwork is involved in trying to get money to do things.
I guess I would say, because again, we just talked about two elements tonight, but if those are concerns, be thinking about which places are priority, you know, which ones are must-haves, which ones are would like to have, you know, things like that, and we can kind of think about it as we go forward. 'Cause those are legitimate concerns. Whether it's finding money within a city budget to pay somebody, or trying to find people who are willing to volunteer. I mean, those are very real considerations that need to be accounted for.
Anybody else have anything? Well, thank you guys very much, and we appreciate it, and look forward to our next meeting.
I would like to go ahead and announce that next meeting, February 15th at 6 p.m. I too want to thank Amy, Michael, Daniel, Lauren, and Elizabeth for joining in, and I thought it was great dialogue. Truly appreciate your efforts, and look forward to continuing this process in 2 weeks. Thank you. Nobody has stepped up, and I just want to say I certainly understand. I mean, we're talking about, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 of us that are new, basically new to the planning and zoning. So it's a busy time, everybody's busy. So I just wanted to let everybody know I did speak with everybody, and I did not have anybody jump up and volunteer. So with that said, I would just open it up and go ahead, ask for a motion.
Anybody want to nominate anybody?
I spoke with Gary earlier today, and he had told me that he would be willing to do it. And so I would make a motion on that, Gary.
Any discussion on that? Any other nominations? Do we hear a second? Second. All in favor? All opposed? Okay, Gary. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm going to let you end this meeting. You started it.
Well, gentlemen, I appreciate working with all of you. I will still be here as a normal, everyday citizen, but I can't chair it just because of the county responsibilities, but I have enjoyed it. And I thank you for everything. So
I want to echo that before you call for a motion to adjourn. I know we want to move out, but I'm going to echo that. I've used the word blessed tonight, and we use it again. We've been blessed to have, I know Brandon served, and did some time as a chair, and I appreciate all that he did. I was not in this position at the time, but certainly was listening in, and I think Brandon did an outstanding job. Craig coming in right after him, you've been spectacular, and I appreciate you wanting at this time to remain on. I really do appreciate it. Your two expertise is going to help us, carry us through this time. It won't be long, and I'll be coming and asking for some other folks to chair up. But let's get everybody's feet wet and move on. And with your two expertise on here, we're gonna be just fine. We've got some great people on this commission. So, Craig, Brandon, I want to thank you guys for all your time and all your efforts. Thank you.
do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.